Hello and welcome to a MHA Larkin-Gowan Insights Brexit bite-sized production. Thank you for listening in. Let's get a couple of time checks in. It was January 2013 when David Cameron first promised a referendum on Britain's membership of the EU. January 2021 will therefore be 8 years from then and represents the end of the transition period for the UK's departure from the EU. If you're listening to this in chronological order, this is our third bite-sized insight. And while in podcasty land it is not normal to date check, I feel it's important right now to highlight that this recording is being made in October 2020, and at the time of making it, a trade deal between the EU and the UK has not been agreed. My name is Chris Scargill, and I'm a business advisor at MHA Larkin-Gowan, and we are putting together a series of podcast-style outputs on key issues for businesses around the issues of Brexit at this important time. Many businesses have already done a lot of preparation. Others are frustrated and not sure of the next steps for them, while others are only now starting to plan. Our aim is to help all of them by exploring some of the issues and consequences of Brexit. Now, I did say we, so that makes it the perfect time to introduce the person with all the answers, the colleague who will help me through the maze of assumption, presumption, and ultimate legislation. And today, that is my lead techie, Rob Skilton. Rob is an advisor in our indirect taxes team, and for all the right reasons, is all over Brexit. How are you, Rob?
I'm really good, thanks, Chris. Enjoying these conversations and delighted to be back for another one. Hopefully the listeners feel the same way.
I hope so too. Now, I love your techie skills. So what fact do you have for me today?
Well, Chris, when you mentioned David Cameron, my mind drifted to macarons. Must nearly be lunchtime. Anyway, I love almonds and I believe they are an ingredient of the macaron. I like eating them rather than baking them, if I'm honest. And shelled almonds have historically been at a 3.5% tariff rate under EU rules, but that's going to be simplified and reduced to 2% under the UK global tariff from 1st of January.
Cameron, macaron, techie fact, great techie fact, but you really did stretch that link, didn't you? Rather tenuous, I think.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So we've had a couple of conversations on Brexit, and I know how focused on it you are. In one of the conversations, you mentioned customs declarations, and that for many businesses, there will be an additional cost. I think we should discuss that further, as I think it's rather important.
I agree. I think there's a few challenges arising, but I think we can come up with a few solutions too.
Excellent. So I like solutions. So let's start at the beginning. What are customs declarations?
Okay, so for those who have only moved goods within the EU in the past, they'll not be accustomed to completing declarations when goods cross a trade border. To keep it simple, the customs declaration provides details of the goods coming into or going out of the EU and soon to be the UK for statistical and taxation purposes. The declaration will include enough details to ensure that the correct import VAT and duty can be calculated and charged to the importer.
That sounds reasonable. So what's the problem?
Well, I think the statistic was that there'll be an increase from 50 million customs declarations to 50 million customs declarations required as a result of Brexit. Although I believe it's also a statistic that 60% of statistics are made up on the spot, or was it 86%? Anyway, it's definitely been said that there will be a five-fold increase in the number of declarations required at an estimated cost to UK businesses of £15 billion.
15 billion? Well, Rob, I've got a techie fact for you. 15 billion. Just to put that in perspective, that's 10 times more than Manchester City have spent on players in the last year. Oh, sorry, last 10 years.
That's incredible. I'll let you decide who's got better value out of that though, Chris. The trader and ultimately the consumer is going to have to bear that cost. And also, there are a limited number of people currently trained to submit customs declarations, which is causing businesses a headache in finding employees qualified to take on the role.
Okay, well, that's certainly starting to sound gloomy. Given that we're trying to help businesses, have you got any good news or solutions?
Well, I'm pleased you asked because there are a couple of things. The first is more a case of buying time for those importing goods into the UK. So the government has announced that the majority of businesses will be able to sign up to submit deferred import declarations. That's basically what it says on the tin. It enables the business to defer submitting its customs declarations for 6 months from the 1st of January 2021.
Excellent. Now you're talking.
Well, yes, but it needs to be thought through carefully as it's only deferring the submission. So for the business that has multiple daily imports, it may sound like a win, but all of those declarations will need to be submitted. So the catch-up exercise may be worse than just getting the forms submitted in the first place. For businesses who are struggling to find someone to complete the declarations, and unfortunately it's a seller's market when it comes to support in submitting those declarations at the moment, it may take a bit of time to find someone who can help at a cost-effective rate. For those who are struggling, HMRC has published a list of customs agents who can help submit customs declarations, and that can be found at www.gov.uk/guidance/list of customs agents and fast parcel operators, with a hyphen between each of those words.
That's easier for you to say, Rob. I bet you can't say that again.
So just to try and get that across and reiterate for those who are scrambling for a pen, www.gov.uk/guidance/list of customs agents and fast parcel operators, and that's a hyphen between each of those words, list of customs agents and fast parcel operators.
Okay, so businesses now have a bit of breathing space. But what if the business is still struggling to find external support? Could someone complete the declarations internally?
Yeah, that's certainly an option. Although, as we've mentioned, finding someone who has the knowledge to submit the declarations can be challenging in the current climate. So some training may be required.
So not everyone has a Rob, but didn't I read somewhere that there is grant funding available for training businesses' own Robs?
Yeah, that's quite right. HMRC has set up a fund to cover the costs of providing the training and also for customs intermediaries to improve their IT or to recruit.
Okay, let's focus on the first of those. What training can our listeners receive that is grant funded?
Well, the training will need to enable the business to complete customs declarations, carry out customs processes, or help other businesses with import and export processes. The funding is capped at £1,500 per person for externally provided training or £250 per person for internally provided training.
Ah, yes. And for the external training, we're offering that, aren't we?
Yes, that's right, Chris. And whilst the training needs to train the attendees to undertake one of the mentioned tasks, the process of completing a customs declaration can include learning how to classify the goods, how to value the goods, how to calculate the duty, the rules of origin in determining where the goods originate, the declaration process and how to minimise errors, shipping terms, i.e. who is the importer, and the reliefs available, which we discussed in an earlier podcast. I believe it's also available for providing training to employees in what information the customs agent will require. So it doesn't necessarily require the business to submit its own declarations at the end of it.
That's really important stuff, and a lot of learning which can be covered at no cost to the business. But there isn't a lot of time between now and Brexit, is there? So how are businesses going to fit that in?
Well, the fund is open for applications until the middle of next year, so there's no requirement for the training to take place prior to 31st of December. If time is tight, and let's be honest, it is getting that way now, then a combination of the deferred import declarations and some training in the new year may be a great solution for those businesses with capacity in the finance team to take those declarations in-house.
Absolutely fabulous. That sounds like another week, another solution for businesses. We don't seem to have touched on VAT though, but Rob, any final thoughts you'd like to add on that?
Well, from an administrative perspective, the postponed import VAT accounting scheme will enable businesses to process import VAT through their VAT returns rather than paying it and reclaiming it, which would create a cash flow issue. But we've already covered that in an earlier podcast on tariffs and VAT, so I won't labour the point. I'll just plug the earlier podcast for those listening out of order.
Thanks, Rob. Short, sharp, and sweet. Thank you. On VAT as well. I like it. So we've covered tariffs in our podcasts, duty reliefs, and customs declarations. Any thoughts on what we should talk about next?
Well, I've had a few clients asking about overseas subsidiaries, particularly where there are regulatory requirements around food labelling. perhaps we ought to have a chat around the benefits of creating an EU subsidiary and what the alternative is in the absence of one.
Oh, you really are over this, aren't you? Great. Although in podcasty world, some people may have already listened to that one, but for those learning like me in chronological order, that's a great idea, Rob. But first, I'd like to thank the listener. So thank you, listener, for listening today. And you've been listening to a MHA Larkin Gowan Brexit Bite-Size Insight podcast. And have been listening to me, Chris Scargill, and him, Rob Skilton. And I'd like to remind my listeners that details of what we've covered today are on our dedicated Brexit hub on our website at larking-gowan.co.uk. Right, Rob, let's talk about those overseas subsidiaries. Are you just hoping I can send you out on a techie break?